All right, hey guys, Tyler Pencek, Real Life School. I got my older brother here. He's been in real estate for 20 plus years, and this podcast is talking about agents, dude. The good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to talk about stories. I've been gone for about 15 years in the Marine Corps, and I've been buying and selling since I've been gone. You've been home. You've been taking over, the Scottsdale real estate market. So this is important for Real Life School members to be able to listen to people that have been there and done it, whether they've, been a broker this entire time, or as a military member. This is for you guys too. So like the lessons learned on the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the stories that we're telling. This should be an educational, video for you guys to pay attention to when you PCS and you're looking for investment property, or go figure, looking for the right agent. Right. So that's why we brought my brother in. Tell him a little about yourself.
Yeah. So it'll be good too for them to get a perspective from you. You've traveled around the whole country and you've transacted in multiple states on both coasts and everywhere.
Yep.
And you really use that platform, the military and the housing and everything to advance yourself as you are today.
Yeah.
But then my perspective is a little bit more local. I've been an agent here in the Valley for 20 years. Started when I was in my early 20s, bought my first place when I was 20 years old, and currently an associate broker with Remax Fine Properties. And in that past 20-year span, which we'll get into later, I've seen major changes and shifts in the market that have dramatically impacted me, for better, for worse. But it's all been ultimately for the better, because I've had so much more experience from the market shifts, and we're kind of in the middle of a flux. And then now I can also start to anticipate when something's going to change. And I'll go in a little bit more of that later.
So you still own that property that you bought when you were 20 years old. You still own it. And I still own my property that I bought when I was 21 years old.
So the one that I bought when I was 20, when I was 19, 20, I sold. And I wish I'd never had sold it.
Okay.
Yes.
It's Fashion
it was a
Square.
Condo, right walking distance from Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall. I bought it for $86,500. And the interest rate was 6.5%. It had shag carpet. I think it was about a 90-year-old lady bought it original, and she was there. And the place was, the mortgage was $450 a month. And, it would have been paid off by now. Dude. I wished I would have sold it. But I ended up selling it to a developer who's coming out here from California. And he got wind of the increasing, because this is in 2004 that I sold it.
Yeah. And
so he was kind of leading the charge with the market surge that we experienced 1 to 2 years after that. And so he paid me $112,500, and I thought I'd won the lottery.
Yeah, dude.
That was a huge payday for me, and I parlayed that into a property that I own.
That you still own.
That I still own. And that one has done extremely well.
Yeah.
But, I wish I never would have sold it, because the amount of passive income in the rental market and how it's changed. Also, I remember hearing this excerpt. Once you sign on the line as a seller, you give up on that appreciation.
Oh, it's done.
It's done.
Yeah.
It's on to the next person.
Yeah.
My advice, especially if you're young, and you can weather the storm.
Yeah.
Because there's highs and lows, obviously, over an extensive period of time in real estate. But if you can weather those storms, hold on to that asset.
Yes.
Because there's nothing like passive income.
Some things, not to interrupt you, but that first property, for the record, it's all about the location, right? You follow all the real estate people. It was within walking distance of Fashion Square Mall. So if anybody's familiar with Scottsdale or Phoenix, it's like Old Town Scottsdale, prime location. His unit overlooked the pool, like the community pool, and a young, up and coming person. You want to be in the, you're in the years where you want to be in the events. You want to be highlight, right? So there was
you could walk home from the bars,
dude,
Old Town.
I know.
It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,000 square foot condo, and I had a roommate.
Yeah.
The roommate was paying $500 a month. And there was so many other people that I've spoken to over the years, and I'm sure you have too, especially being in the military. But I've told them, especially if they're young, they're in college or they're in their early 20s, and you can swing it. Okay. I don't want anyone to overextend themselves. But if you've got multiple roommates living with you, rather than paying rent, paying someone else's mortgage, my advice is just to bite the bullet, to buy something. I remember I had a motorcycle, a Suzuki GSXR 750, and I had my Camaro with nitrous and slicks. and I sold
Fast and the
both of these
Furious.
cars. Oh yeah, big time. And I sold my assets, right? What I had as a 19, 20-year-old kid. And I took that money and put it down as a down payment on the condo. And it was totally worth it.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure. All right. So those of you who are watching, it's coming from a level of probably 40 plus years, not to mention the family and the friends that we've associated with over our entire lives. All right. It's coming from a place of like, we've been there, we've done it. We still got rental properties throughout the United States and including here, Scottsdale. So we want to talk to you guys about agency, like the people that is your broker or your middleman to buying and selling, because we both have seen that there is more bad agents than there are good agents. Okay. And being a good agent just doesn't mean, I can sell one or two, but like making a sustainable way of life for your family and for your reputation. Right.
Right.
So we're going to talk about good ones, bad ones, and then just some advice for people trying to get into the business. So what have you seen over the last 20 years, just surface level in the markets from 2008, which you talked about, to now? What do you think?
So, when I first got into the business, I knew it was something that I was interested in. I had a vague understanding of the way that it worked based on my experience in purchasing a place. But I knew I liked real estate. I liked the whole aspect of it. But also ultimately, I was looking at making a high yield for my time. But ultimately, I surrounded myself with really great mentors. And I think that is crucial for anybody that's wanting to get into the business as an agent themselves. I can't tell you how many new agents I've mentored over the years, and sadly, they all follow the same trend. And I think that media and a lot of these TV shows that they put out there, I don't think it's an accurate representation of what working in the trenches is really like day in and day out. So what these people always come to me and they always say is I want to be in the business. I want to be an agent, right? Yeah, no, I want to work hard. I want it to be a career. I don't want it to be just a quick little
hobby.
Right. No, I want to do this for the rest of my life. But they only want to do luxury properties. So you got a 20-year-old telling me they only want to sell, $3-4 million plus homes because they're going to be an expert.
Which was an outlier 20 years ago. Now it's like to find out.
It's more commonplace, but so they want to do that. They want to make these huge hits. And that's all they want to focus on. Yeah. They don't want to do the rentals. They don't want to do a $100,000 condo. They don't want to drive all the way across town. They don't want to do the difficult work that you cut your teeth on. Right. And one of the great mentors that I had, it was probably one of the best. He told me that this industry, the mindset that you want to have is it's a white collar industry, but you want to have a blue collar work ethic. So that means that you want to grab your shovel every single day. And that's how I treat it. You got to work hard and don't worry about the money. Don't worry about the return on your time. I think that's a wrong perspective. And part of this too is fiduciary. Now that word is supposed to embody what we do for a career. And that means that you're putting someone else's financial interests above yours. And in doing that, you're not then looking out for your time or how much you're going to get paid. Yeah. You want to put your clients first and do an outstanding job, do the absolute best job that you can for them. And the money will take care of itself. Right. And I think some people, they put the cart before the horse. They get that backwards. And so, for those who are just wanting to get in this and think they're going to make all this money and they see these TV shows or these commercials, I think that's not the right perspective to have at all.
So my take on the last 20 years is it's turned into a thing. It's turned into a trend, right? Like you mentioned the TV shows, HGTV, all the things. It's great. There's been a market. But I think 20 years ago, if you were in real estate, it was like a quiet market, right? There wasn't as many. Then all of a sudden, you had this big boom in real estate where people were doubling their money. Interest rates were low. You could just go out and buy whatever it is you wanted, right? So then that created its own marketing plan and people started to like open up their ears, right?
Yeah.
With that became the opportunity for people to say, I'm leaving my job. I'm going to go sell real estate because there's tons of money there. But what they didn't understand was the influx. When times are great, even if you were a newt, you knew nothing, you could make money. But then when the bad times hit, they weren't used to eating hot dogs for 2 years or eating top ramen to survive or weather the storm, right? So over the last 20 years, I think we had an influx of people just saying, I'm going to go get my real estate license, not knowing what you said. What does it actually take when you're in the trenches, cutting your teeth, blue collar work ethic, dig in that shovel.
Right.
You may not sell anything for a year, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes.
It takes years. I mean, if you're starting from scratch on your own, it's going to take a long time to establish yourself.
Yeah.
And so you have to budget accordingly. I mean, it's not easy.
Trust. When you're starting out, how many times the viewers, I'm sure you know this, my sister got her real estate license. My aunt got her real estate. Oh, my next door neighbor. Oh, my coworker. That does not qualify you to know what you're talking about.
That's just it. I can't tell you how many, I would say maybe a third of my business over the years, I call them recycleds.
Yes.
Because what happened is they were in the middle of a transaction using whoever they knew that maybe just got their license or was not experienced.
Yep.
It's something went wrong. And the person didn't know what to do.
All the time.
And they're asking around. They're asking their broker. They're trying to find out.
They're asking you.
They are asking me. And then somehow they end up in my office and they need help.
Yeah.
And I help get them over the finish line because I've made a lot of mistakes. There's no substitute for experience. And there's tremendous value. I think too, we've had a lot of these iBuyers, these entities, corporations that have purchased homes directly from sellers. And I think the reason for that is because the public and people, they don't maybe see the true value in an agent because a lot of the people that they've interacted with haven't demonstrated tremendous value.
Fiduciary.
They haven't demonstrated that look at how hard this person is working for me, and they're an expert. They're representing my best interest.
Yep.
I trust them implicitly. I think that's a rarity, unfortunately.
So when I'm mentoring these people, not on podcasts, but I do one-on-ones, and the biggest thing that I come up against when people are trying to buy their first home, and they're a buyer, right? They go, well, why don't I just go directly to that agent? Or why don't I just walk into that open house? Or why don't I just do this? Because the knowledge behind it. And this is why we exist, right? For the record, 99% of the time, the seller is the one that's paying the commission. So if you're a buyer, if you learn nothing from this podcast, nothing, right? As a buyer, you don't pay your agent anything 99% of the time. It's the seller that is paying the commission for the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. So why would you not have somebody that has been there and done it look out for your best interest? It's a win-win-win on all different levels. So I just want to say that there. Like, I was talking to two people last week, two separate occasions, and they're like, yeah, I think I'm just going to call the agent directly. I'm like, what are you doing? That person has already signed a listing agreement with the seller, and they don't give a hoot about you.
No.
And they think just, because there's too many salesmen out there, there's too many scams, the loyalty, right? That's what really makes a great agent, is the loyalty and the trust and confidence in your abilities, right? But the public doesn't see that. They just see marketing, HGTV, turnover, income, big money, and that somebody's going to make that money. So there's just this weird, awkward transition between buyers and sellers and representation. But like I said, as a buyer, look out for somebody that's been doing it more than 3 years, and they're not your neighbor. They're not your coworker or your cousin. I mean, we see that all the time. And then all of a sudden you see the lack of communication. You see how the transaction was teetering. Whereas if you go with a professional, somebody that's been there and done it, then you can actually have trust and confidence that they will foresee what the potential issues are in the contract, in the inspection, in the renegotiation after the due diligence period, and then up until close. Like, that's what you're paying for.
There's a litany of pitfalls that you could butt up against. And there's so many shortfalls, so many things that could go wrong. And I try not to bore my clients with all the hundreds of possibilities, but they do exist. And sometimes when you do run up against one of those, you do want to have somebody who has your best interests at heart and can help you navigate through that.
Yeah.
And we don't want to bash new agents too hard. Hopefully they're surrounding themselves by somebody who's experienced and can advise them.
Yep.
But some of these agents that I've mentored, they want to do it all on their own. As soon as they get a lead or someone that they know, they don't need any help. They don't want to pay out anybody. They don't want any assistance.
Yeah.
It's all them, but they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so I was going to touch on this. Before I got into the business, when it started, I mean, it used to be the MLS was a book. Mm-hmm. It was so analog, right? Mm-hmm. You had this book, and it came out once a month, and then there would be these supplications to the book. that you would get weekly or daily to add to your MLS book. This is all before the internet.
Yes. Okay.
And even when I first joined the MLS, my key was not attached to my phone. It wasn't high tech. It wasn't really communicating with a satellite, but that key had to be updated every single day. And it was just a totally different workplace. And that's all changed now. So now with the internet, people think, oh, what do I need an agent for? What do I need to do this? I can just find it online. Well, the big difference is you're going to be treated like a customer rather than a client. So if I have your house listed for sale, and my job is to get you as much money for it as possible.
Sure.
If somebody calls me off the street, now legally I'm supposed to hold their hand through it, but the ultimate client is you.
Seller.
And sometimes these buyers think, well, I'll just get the commission for myself. Well, it doesn't quite work that way.
You're not an agent. If
You're not an agent,
yeah.
And you don't get the savings. And all people try to explain that to me, and they don't really see the other side of the curtain. And I can understand why they would think that. Sure. But ultimately, the commission is negotiated up front. So whatever my fee is negotiated, and that because they called me directly doesn't mean that they get that money or they have that savings.
Right.
So if the shoe were on the other foot and you had the house listed with another agent and I'm working with this buyer, we're coming in and we're going to try to negotiate. We are going to negotiate you pretty hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it's going to go.
And as a buyer's agent, you're trying to get the most bang for your buck, right? As a seller, I want my seller to make the most money. Duh. But as a buyer, I want my client to get the best deal. Right. Meaning, I'm not paying what you're asking for. Now let's get in the ring, dude. Let's box it out, right?
And that's doing your job.
Yes.
That's negotiating. And that's another thing that I want to touch on is if people have an aversion to confrontation and awkward interactions, and tough negotiations and conversations, it may not be the right job for you because that's all the existence is.
Yeah, and it's even harder now.
It's way harder now. You're butting up against it. There was someone that I had met with, went on a listing interview, and his property is worth 3 to 4 times what he paid for it. It's worth a significant amount of money.
Yeah. What's a lot of money for viewers?
It's worth
relative.
$1
million, $3 million, $700,000.
In comparison to what he paid for it, he paid in the mid to low 200,000s.
Okay.
And it's currently worth, let's say, below $800,000.
That's
so
a lot
it's
of
appreciated quite a bit, right? So he wants the sun, the moon, and the stars. He wants every last penny for that property.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to pay anybody anything
to represent him.
He doesn't. He said, you know what? He goes, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. He goes, I'll pay you, but I don't want to pay anybody else. And I said, well, I can understand why you would feel that way.
Sure.
However, when I sell my own properties, I don't even try to pay a discounted co-broke because I see the value in having a buyer represented by an agent.
Right.
I want to pay them their full hit.
Right.
Because I want as much money as I can get for my property.
We talked about it earlier. I want to touch on it. So your potential seller is thinking, we're just going to get one of those buyers off the street and we don't have to pay a commission. Now, for the record, all of you viewers, that is a unicorn. And those are all the people that I told you about this last week. They're expecting to walk into an open house and not have the seller pay a commission. It doesn't work like that. You are limiting the scope of the people that are potentially going to be a buyer for you.
Yeah.
When you pay the commission, I mean, let's face it, people. You pay your doctors, you pay your engineers, you pay your attorneys, you pay your real estate agents. All these people keep you alive and make you money, right? You don't want to gyp the people that do this for a living. Am I right?
Completely. I think it's short-sighted. In my opinion, I think, you have a significant appreciation in a property and you're going to net more, which I explained this to the person. You're going to net more if you have an experienced representative looking out for you than if you're just focused on a smaller dollar amount. And I told him, you could probably get somebody to list it for free if you went over here to the real estate school and you rounded up somebody from out. They would just be happy to have your sign in front of their house. But they're not going to know what they're doing. And if you have somebody who's good at something, their time is valuable.
Worth it, for sure. So that kind of opens up the segue here. Good agents versus bad agents. Okay, so I was in Hawaii from 2014 to 18. I was stationed there in Kaneohe Bay. Love it. Oahu was awesome. But I've always had a passion for real estate. So what did I do? I bought some properties and I flipped them and made a ton of money. But the point here is I found a good agent. I'm an agent in Arizona. I've been an agent for almost 20 years. Okay. But I didn't practice it full time because I went and left for the Marine Corps. But I still kept my agency alive and active. Right.
Right.
My point is that I partnered with an agent in Hawaii and she was fantastic. Okay. And this is the key here. One, she wasn't cheap. One, she wanted to interact with me. Two, three, four, whatever. Sorry, public math. But she wanted to get to know me. So when she saw a property, she knew that my personality and the property would be a mesh. Not just, hey, what's your budget? Let's find you a home in that budget. That is a bad agent. That is a juvenile way of entering the business. You want to know your client, right? So if I got my family, right, and you're coming and I'm interviewing for an agent, I got kids. I need grocery store. I need some sort of activity. So an agent would get to know the family. What do you guys like to do? You like to hike? You like the mountains? You like the ocean? Whatever that may be, you're getting to know that family. And that is the difference between a good agent and a bad agent. Bad agents can be like, what's your budget? Have you been pre-approved? Yeah. What's your left and right lateral limits? Let's find you a home just there. There's more to it. You know what I mean? Right. And the agent in Hawaii, we built a relationship. And not only that, but I was able to take my trust in her. And then meanwhile, I was building wealth for friends, coworkers, people in the squadron. In the last 15 years, I probably have made between 10 to $15 million net value for the people in my surrounding circle, meaning people in the squadron. I'd say, listen, you're getting BAH. You're getting tax-free money, dude. Yeah. You need to buy a home. Totally. Because you're going to spend $3,500 a month on rent. Right? That's 40 grand times 4. That's like $120,000, $150,000 you just wasted. So what did I do? I took what I was good at and what I love to do, and I built this relationship with this fantastic agent. And then she helped, 10 other people buy a home. And years later, they're calling me and they're like, yeah, I just made 150 grand or I made 500 grand, whatever. So what do you think about good agents, bad agents, and examples?
So one thing I want to touch on first is, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I'm a big believer in real estate as a mechanism for building wealth in this country.
Amen.
Right? I mean, I know people who have owned businesses who have had tremendous success over the course of their life, and they've rented. And they've rented to the tune of a lot of money over the duration of 7 to 15 years. And to me, I see that's a significant amount of money, and they've leased their cars, they've rented everything, they've ran credit card debt.
Sure.
And they don't have anything tangible to show for all their years of toil. So I'm a big advocate for having a tangible asset in that regard. One thing that jumps out to me for agents that aren't super effective would be communication.
Yeah.
I can't tell you, even nowadays, there are a lot of agents, and some of them are pretty prominent. Yeah. Somebody once told me it's not what you know, it's who you know.
And who knows you.
To a certain extent, right. And to a certain extent, that I've seen there are some people out there that do very well because of that, because they just know a lot of people. Yeah. Which there's tremendous value in networking, don't get me wrong. But you can't reach that person. Like you can't, with crucial deadlines too.
Yeah.
With crucial deadlines, they won't text you back. They won't email you back. They certainly won't take a phone call. Right?
Are you talking about agents or
I'm talking about agents.
Okay.
I'm talking about agents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you need to be accessible. If you're representing somebody, they need to be able to reach that person.
Yeah.
Right. There was years ago, and this is a funny story. There was a client of mine who had a property in another state, and that other state had an agent that was very high profile. And so I know they were very successful.
Sure. Yeah.
So I referred my client to that agent. I didn't even want a referral because I wanted them to do as best of a job as possible.
Yep.
Right. I wanted them to make their full payday. Right.
Sure.
Which in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have done because I didn't do a very good job. So what happens is my client begins to complain about this agent not communicating with them.
Yeah.
Well, the two of them followed each other on Instagram. And my client reaches out to me about the property in this other state. And they're a week past the close of escrow date. They're several days past the close of escrow date, right?
Potential to lose earnest money?
Well, they're about to, who knows? And I mean, they're the seller. They're the seller.
Oh, okay.
So someone else hasn't performed on this transaction, right?
Yep.
And they can't reach their agent. They can't reach anybody to find out what's going on. Well, they're following them on Instagram, and this person is posting videos of themselves driving around in a convertible with their animals, and they're singing along, and And so my client sees this video coming through on their social media, and the person's not returning their phone calls for days.
They're jamming, dude. They're living their
Yeah,
life.
why worry about it?
Oh no.
It's pretty. I mean, it's horrible, right? But that's
Yeah.
pretty funny. So.
Yeah. An example of a bad agent. So when I was in Hawaii, I had other people that saw how successful things were happening, and somebody got their a friend of somebody in the squadron got their real estate license, and they thought I can just hop right in because look at the money,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
So then they invited me to coffee, and I was like, yeah, no problem, I can help you. But here's the catch. They go, well, can you stop referring all these people to your agent who you've built a history with? For years, I've had this relationship, so I'm very loyal to her. But this girl said, hey, why don't you give me a book of business? And I was kind of taken back. I forget how I explained it, but I was just like along the lines of, I already have a relationship built. Congrats on getting your license, et cetera, et cetera. Slowly but surely, she weaseled her way into the squadron, making super friends with all the other people. And it's like, you don't understand. Now you're putting yourself, yes, you don't know what you're doing. And not only do you not know what you're doing, but you're putting other people in an awkward conversation and situation that if something gets fouled, you're risking your friendship, which is ultimately more important in this type of environment than any real estate.
Yeah.
So she asked to be partners, and I kind of neglected. But anyways, another bad example of this person. There was somebody leaving Hawaii, moving to Pensacola, Florida. Okay. So this family was from Pensacola. They had ties, and I wasn't offended. But what happened was when that family, who knew me and I've been in real estate, they asked me my opinion, but they told me that when they went to go look, this agent, they were having personality issues, and they were being shown properties that was not on their bucket list.
Okay.
Like, this is the stuff that I want.
Right.
So they call me in confidence. Okay. They say, hey, Tyler, we've gone with this other agent. No problem. I said, okay, let me phone a friend. So I reach out to this person who was in Hawaii, and I said, hey, you're from Pensacola. Could you have a contact? Not knowing that they had already been talking to the same agent. So I called this girl and I said, listen, I have a friend that's in the squadron. They're moving there. I said, they've had a pretty bad issue with an agent that they've been working with. And they have been shown properties that's wasn't even in their criteria. Not even the right bedrooms. I want 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Didn't even the same simple, basic criteria. Right. And the lady in Pensacola goes, what's her name? And I told her the name. And she goes, I've actually been working with them.
Whoops.
So I'm like, oh my gosh. So now my special trust and confidence in the person that referred me in from Hawaii that tried to steal business from Hawaii, I had to go out and find my own agent. And
it'd be very vague. And you got to start from scratch, finding a new one, which is difficult.
And I did. It took me, maybe a day. But hey.
Reviews. But, reviews aren't everything, too.
I know. Flawed.
There's an agent that I know, he writes his own reviews and sends them to his clients to post.
Oh, no.
So it's not from the heart. I think you can kind of discern through that. In this day and age, though, I think that they're important. I started doing reviews, I don't know, within the last year, I would say.
Yeah.
And I reached out to a couple past clients that have written reviews for past transactions. I wish I would have started it much earlier.
Sure.
But I think that can be an indicator. But experience, again, there's no substitute for it.
Sure.
There are people that I see that they just get in the business and they're doing all these videos. They're walking around these luxury properties. Oh, this is the home, this and that. If you're looking at this video for the first time, not knowing the business or the industry, you think, oh my gosh, who is this person, right? They're 6 months, not even.
Yeah.
And they have no transactions.
Yeah.
I know of multiple new agents. They get in and they get out. I'm with the brokerage at Remax Fine Properties.
Yep.
And it's kind of, for some new agents that just want to come in and cash checks.
Sure.
A lot of them end up leaving.
Oh, yeah.
Because the fees and everything like that, it's not free to be in this business.
Sure.
Which I think is a good thing.
Weeds out.
Because it absolutely does. It forces, especially a company like the one that I'm at has a reputation for basically being hands off. We're all independent, seasoned agents that know what we're doing.
Okay, yeah.
So I think to that extent, a brokerage, I would look at that too.
Sure.
If I were an engineer or a doctor and had no interest in other than buying and selling my own properties, I would probably look for an agent that's with a established
a name.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Brokerage. So that's important. And then also, how green is somebody? I've had a lot of the people that I've had that were very successful in business over the years.
Yeah.
When I've really been closely vetted. Now, statistically, most people out there, they don't even get the opinion of a second agent. They just go with whoever the first person is that they're introduced to. But I've had some of these people that I knew were vetting a long list of agents, and I was grilled.
Yeah.
And it was a bit uncomfortable, but they knew what they were talking about,
Yeah.
and I appreciated that.
Yeah.
And they were much better to work with. They they ended up choosing me, which is
Sure.
great. I was happy about that.
Sure.
But they asked some very scrutinizing questions, and I felt like I was, being interrogated.
You're being
But that was a
interviewed.
good thing.
You're being interviewed.
Right.
Right. It's a
By
job.
established, super successful people.
Yeah. So I got friends obviously in the military and real estate across the country. I do exactly what you just mentioned. So people will call me and say, "Hey Tyler, I'm thinking about buying a place in Monterey, or I'm thinking about buying a place in Pensacola, Hawaii, et cetera, et cetera." And I'm like, listen, don't just find the nearest friend that you have. Let's do some homework on it. That's how I do all my properties outside Arizona, is that I will look at an area, I'll check to see who's got the most listings, and then active, and then I'll go into sold listings. So I'm trying to see who's doing the business,
Success.
who is doing exactly. So that's how I do it, and I do it for my friends. So I'll call, right? For example, I'm working with a good buddy of mine. He's going to Monterey Naval Postgraduate School, and I'm like, dude, don't just call the nearest idiot. Okay, just don't do that. Let me call for you and interview like they did to you.
Sure.
How long you been in the business?
Well, it
Are you
was in
commercial,
person,
residential,
too.
which is even more,
totally.
because now I can read body language.
Everything.
I can see, are you
Presentation.
squirrely? Yeah, with a hard question, what happens when negotiations get tough? How are you going to react with a buyer or seller, the opposite of the transaction? How are you going to do that?
Right.
So I'm looking out for the best interest of my friends and family across the United States, and I do the same thing.
Yeah.
How long you been in business? What do you sell? What's your average home sale? 400 grand, 2 million? How long you been in this market, this little,
Sure.
grid square on buying and selling homes?
Right.
If you're going to be good, you pick one location and you just dominate it. Right?
Yeah.
And then when you got enough, experience, and you can branch out. It's like a lot of people, you don't just hop right into commercial real estate. You start selling homes first, get and understand the
Maybe,
transaction.
or some people go directly into commercial and they
Hard.
train up with a big brokerage.
Colliers.
I mean, some of those things have their system of education, and it's almost like a probationary period for a year. I mean, I know because I initially wanted to go into commercial.
Yeah.
And I ended up falling into residential, and I've actually done several commercial transactions.
Yeah.
To the extent that I'm one of the agents that those transactions have to funnel through.
Yep.
Because of my experience in that regard, but it's a totally different animal. But what I was going to say is, there are people that I know of that are very high profile,
Mm-hmm.
and what they do is they'll end up, because of the amount of activity,
Mm-hmm.
they'll throw a bunch of listings out there, but they don't have a good conversion rate.
Okay. What do you mean?
What I mean is, if you're selling a property, rather than them having the difficult conversation with you, they'll ask you what you think it's worth. What do you think it's worth? 2 million, 3 million? Okay, cool. Let's get the photographer out here. They don't actually do the work and have the tough conversation with you, their seller, before they go ahead and spend all this money and time and blast this luxury home out there all over magazines, the internet, and everything like that. And then it ends up going canceled or expired. You don't just want to showcase a property, you want to sell it.
Right.
So I prefer to focus in on the conversion rate, because I think that's very important, rather than just getting everything, throwing it out there and seeing what sticks.
So you're saying
on the listing side.
So you're saying, as a listing side, some of these agents, bad agents, will go to their seller and say, well, what do you think it's worth?
Yeah.
First?
And you could tell this right away when you interview with them, because they just end up putting it all out there, and they have the appearance of being very successful. And to some extent they are. Yeah. But if I'm selling my home, I don't just want to advertise it out there for whatever I think it's worth.
No, you want it to sell.
Right. And usually, people, if anyone's going to be an optimist, it's going to be a seller, right? How many sellers will think that their property is worth less than it's worth?
Nobody ever.
Like, it's very, very rare. And there have been a couple of people, and I'm like, well, listen, let's look at the comps here. I think we can do a little bit better for you.
Yeah.
And then they're very pleased, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But so that's one aspect that I look at. The second would be the financial position of the agent. I want to know where they're at. And some of these could be some kind of personal questions.
Yeah.
But do they own property themselves? I think it's very important to operate as a principal yourself, so that you can better associate with what your client's needs are, because you can relate to where they're coming from. I think that's very important. So I sometimes would encourage sellers or buyers to inquire and find out the financial position of their agent. I mean, there's another time that I think about when I was showing a condo and I couldn't reach the agent at all. And he was an assistant for kind of a bigger name, prominent here in the Valley. And the guy finally calls me back and he's super arrogant to me. He knows that I'm an agent. He's super arrogant on the phone. And he's like, well, maybe I could meet you, tomorrow at 4:30. And so I'm like, okay, well, we'll make that work. So I go out to the property and here comes this. It was an old Maserati. And I put the value on it at 25 grand tops. So let's say it was 150 grand new, right?
Sure.
He goes squeaking by with the brakes. I know his dash is lit up like a Christmas tree because I'm into cars too, right?
Yeah,
I know
you
that
got
whole
the
side of it.
Transmission and check
Everything.
engine.
The car needs more service than what it's worth, right? It's going.
Yeah.
He goes in and he parks it and he gets out and he thinks that he's the man. And he comes walking up to me and he's just super arrogant. It's like, wow, buddy.
Yeah.
He's really trying to fake it in a certain realm. And maybe for some people that works.
Sure.
That's not kind of how I operate. I like to, live within my means rather than portray this outrageous success.
Yeah.
I like to be the real McCoy rather than trying to front. So not saying that I am, some big wig, but I think it's kind of funny because that guy could be he could be renting an apartment. He could be way behind on payments, service on his car, whatever it is.
Yep.
And here he comes in. He needs that sale. He's reliant on it.
Oh, yeah.
And especially if if he'll do it for free or do it for super cheap, like sometimes that desperation, you don't want that to carry through because I think it undermines a position of power for the seller or for the buyer.
Sure. So that's an example of a bad agent. Somebody, because we all know if you don't sell a property, then you don't get paid. Got it. But if the guy's coming rolling in with, caution lights and check engine lights and squeaky brakes and all that stuff, you got to look at people's motives, right? Are they going to be genuine? Are they going to represent my best interest?
Yeah.
Have they done their homework? Yeah, you brought me the comps, but I really think it's like this. Okay, it's a give and take between you and your client. But there are just some people that you could just sniff and see and just witness that they're not going to represent you. And a lot of them are out, more obvious than not. So that question of, hey, I need to know your financial situation a little bit, a little, I'm going to ask a few invasive questions because you're going to know my financial situation when I'm selling this thing. You're going to know what I paid for it. You're going to know what I'm going to make. Why is it not, hey, let's partner here, right?
Totally. I mean, I can't tell you how many of my clients over the years, you get to know somebody pretty well.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I end up finding out a lot of information about them.
Sure.
Which I keep private. But that's between me and them. But sometimes they find out my position. And one of the things that I do, I don't offer this up to people I don't know that well, but I'll pull out my wallet and I'll tell them, look, I got my Costco membership card and a debit card. Like I don't do credit cards.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's somewhat of an indicator, I think.
Sure.
Like I'm not a big, and I know there are people who totally disagree with me. There are people who disagree with paying off mortgages and things like that. I've got my own way of doing things.
Yeah.
Because of the experiences that I've been through, both good and bad.
Yeah.
Having gone through all those market shifts over the years and seen everything that happens.
Right.
So I've got my way that works for me, and I feel like it's a pretty solid foundation.
Yeah.
So I can accurately do a good job for somebody
For sure.
and represent them and not undermine their position of power.
Right. Hey, I want to make a point here. When we talk about our commissions as good agents, it's best to do it up front. There's full disclosure. And if you can't have a comfortable conversation talking about money and what you as a professional agent are going to be getting paid, that tells your client that you may not be worth your money, right? As an example.
Yeah.
So I'll share it with you guys. We've been working on a deal, not in Arizona, car washes, all right? And a little side business here. But right up front, we go to the client and say, hey, listen, our commission is going to be 200 grand a box. Okay. You got 15 car washes. That's our commission. And if you don't like it, no big deal. Try and find somebody else to buy it. But we're in the business. We've been doing it for 30, 40 years, right? I mean, upfront talk about my commission. And if you don't like it, then go find some private equity firm to, spend $50 to $70 million to buy it. I guarantee you they're not going to go to some Joe Schmo or residential company. They're going to go to somebody that's been there and done it. And that's the beauty behind being an expert. And these agents, if you're in residential, crush residential. If you're in commercial, crush it, right? Find your niche market, right? These people that are spread thin, they're just chasing a paycheck each and every deal. And then eventually they get sick of eating hot dogs for 2 years. And then they they leave.
Burnout.
Yeah.
There's been a lot. You see a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
Because it's not the way that things are, especially enduring for the course of years, and the way that you think that they're going to be, they're never going to align.
No.
But so my advice too to new agents, people that want to get in the business, is just align yourself with somebody who's experienced, who's solid, who you respect.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Like Grandpa always said, always listen to success.
Yeah.
I think that's very important too.
Yeah.
And someone that maybe aligns with your values and your way of doing life, right? Yeah. There was a funny story that I remember from years ago from the guy that was brand new in the business, and he went to one of the top names that he could find, right? Mm-hmm. And he gets an interview with this guy. He wants to work on his team. And the guy sits there and he's super, super arrogant, sitting across the desk. And he goes, well, my name is such and such. And when people talk to you, they're going to see me. And I don't know if you got what it takes. Which there could be some truth to that. You know, if you want to have somebody who's professional. But when you hold yourself in such high regard, it's no longer than about your clients. It's about you. And your ego. Yeah. And I think if you want to really represent a client, a principal well as a fiduciary, you know, it's a service industry, and you put that person above you, even if you have more money or have done more business than they have, who cares? That's really secondary. You need to shelve yourself and then put that person first and do a good job for them. Yeah. That's another thing. You don't want to have someone really arrogant.
It's the person. So matching the personalities between, you know, your client and that right agent, I think that's critical, right? Phases of life. You know, if I was going to go buy a home here in Arizona, I wouldn't probably get an agent. I know, I'm sorry, probably not supposed to be saying this, but an older agent, 60s, 70s, because they're not able to relate in that season of life in which I'm about to purchase. So when I talk to agents or friends, I'm like, hey, we need to find you somebody in the same phase of life, because they're going to think like you, right? Sure. And if I am 45 years old, 50, 60 years old, and I'm trying to buy a home, retirement community in the mountains away from all the hustle and bustle, I'm probably not going to hire a 25-year-old, because their mentality and their maturity may not be equivalent to my phase of life. That's just a suggestion. It's just my little 2 cents. But I want to focus towards people getting into the business, because you and I both love real estate. We've been in our entire lives, right? When somebody is starting out, you said it first and foremost, yes, mentor, right? But a lot of people sometimes don't know how to checklist style, Barney style, walk them through a transaction. So what is your overarching 30,000 foot top down look at, hey, I may have, you know, gone to college, I'm not using it, but I really like real estate, interests me. What would you tell somebody that's young, mid-20s, when they're starting out right now? Like, quantifiably, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody is looking at getting in the business as an agent themselves, you know, I think that they need to be interviewing people who are successful that would have time for them. Yeah. I think, you know, looking through the cost, the real cost, not an optimistic cost of what it's going to take to be in the business and endure. And then also they need to hunker down and really dedicate themselves. I mean, there are people that in my company that I've met that I didn't think that they were going to amount to anything. I didn't think that they were going to have success, but they hunkered down and they did the work, and they ended up becoming very successful. Yeah. And there's somebody else who was a seasoned veteran. What he would say is, real estate works if you do. So I think that's a pretty good nugget of wisdom there, because these people hunkered down, they networked themselves well without making it seem awkward. Like you said, that I guess Airman's wife who had gotten her license. And
yeah.
And you don't want to make people feel like multi-level marketing here. Like I'm trying to get and make you feel awkward. Yeah. And I've told people about this too. We have friends, you know, they have another agent that they're loyal to. And someone told me this and they almost felt bad. And I said, listen, my friendship is not conditional on you using me professionally. Amen. Like, that's fine if you have that. Yes. I respect that. Yes. You know, I wish that I had some clients over the years that had felt that same way towards me. Yes. Especially seeing how they ended up going with someone who was recommended to them or insisted on them by a family member. And they ended up getting a worse deal. And then they came to me after the fact, and I told them, hey, I can't help you. Since you're asking me, this is how I feel, but I can't help you now, right? No. It's already past the fact. Yeah. So some of my recommendations, if people are starting out in the real estate, I recommend it. Whether you are a primary home owner or looking into getting your own investment properties, if you're going to be an agent, I think it's awesome, right? You can make passive income. You may not
be qualified to eat hot dogs for 2 years, because you don't just walk into a book of business, right? Very few people, we call them outliers, will walk into a family of tested, proven real estate agents and brokers and be like, here's my book of business, son, or here's my book of business, relative business partner. It doesn't work like that. All right. So expectations up front. If you're going to be a new agent, get hungry and be comfortable being hungry.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying for 2 years, there's no sense of saying, putting a cap on it, but right off the bat, expectation management, you may not have that book of business and you need to watch your finances get skinny in terms of your housing, if your family situation, like, cause you're going to be the one making money. If you don't sell anything, the reality is then you don't eat. Okay. So when you're starting out, hustle. And what I mean by that is do the work that other people don't want to do and be great at it. Property management sucks. Property management sucks. Some big firms do it well.
Sure.
But it sucks.
It's, it's not going to be as glamorous as selling a $5 million home. But to your point, another mentor of mine had told me a good career is conducive. You need to have great debt management if you want to endure a long career. So that means managing your finances, right?
Right.
I mean, there have been, and I kind of have PTSD from everything I went through from the market crash before, but there have been times I've made big paydays and I just don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
I save it, which I think you need to have a balance. I think, go out to dinner, do something minor. Sure. But then there have been other people I know that haven't sustained a career in this business where they sold one property and they think they won the lottery.
Mercedes-Benz.
Oh, everything, right?
New
they
motorcycle.
sign up for everything because they think it's always going to be like
We're
that.
We're going on a trip.
Because they deserve it.
Yes.
Because you deserve it, right? So I don't agree with that way, and I don't think it's sustainable, but the market will flush those people out.
Yeah, eventually. So, hey, that's pretty much enough time for agents today. 20 years. I mean, it is evolved into this. It's a new marketing. The social media, the television, and there's some serious money there. But the thing is, if you've been in the business long enough, you can sniff out somebody that's been there and done it and been hungry and have been comfortable with it. Because maybe it takes 2-3 years to put together a deal, which I know sometimes it does, and sometimes it can be a cash buyer and close in 15 days. You just don't know. All right. So hopefully this podcast, closing comments for this. What do you think? Overarching.
The last thing, and I'm representing a good friend of mine on a first time purchase right now. And I think the other thing too is you have to have the heart of a teacher, or if you're looking to buy and sell yourself and you need a good agent, you want to have somebody who has the heart of a teacher that will walk you through this.
Yeah.
And is really looking out for you.
Yes.
I think that's so important, right?
Yeah.
I told him to buy years ago and he missed out on a lot of equity. But here he is now and he's buying and we're making it work for him. We negotiated in this market to his benefit.
Yeah.
And he's very happy with that. And I'm happy to participate in that. And I'm not like, oh my gosh, I have to answer another question.
Right.
Like I think you can discern from somebody whether or not they enjoy what they're doing.
Sure.
So we're here for resource questions, anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So podcasts will be put on reallifeschool.com. There'll be a comment section. You can come there. You can put in your question. Moderators, mentors, real estate agents in that field will be able to answer it. And we're just glad that you put in 45 minutes roughly of listening to this podcast. One closing comment. They are not making any more real estate, and everybody needs a place to live. Yeah. It's just, what is your role in real estate? We all know that it's been incredible over the last 10 years, but what happens when the market's not so hot? If you haven't been financially savvy, you haven't had, you have success listens to success. If you didn't listen to people like myself and Antonio or those that we surround ourselves with, you may be in trouble. So we're here for the support. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.